My guest today is Richard Raymond, a British filmmaker who developed a love for film from a young age and began making his own short films at the age of 15. Now, in 2015, he made his feature film debut with Desert Dancer, starring Freida Pinto, a biological drama about the Iranian dancer, which premiered at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival and received critical acclaim. Now, Richard's follow-up film, Souls of Totality, was released in 2018, and it was the first film in history to be shot during a real solar eclipse. Now, the film won awards at 12 international film festivals and solidified Richard as a rising talent in the film industry. And in 2020, he directed A Million Eyes, which was released to widespread praise for its thought-provoking and visually stunning portrayal of a young, gifted photographer. The short film starred Joe Morton and Katie Lowes and won awards at 10 international film festivals, including being longlisted for the Oscar. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker Richard Raymond to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. What was the first film that you saw that ignited your desire to be a filmmaker?
Oh, man. I grew up in Hertfordshire, north of London, and I think our family house was very isolated. And so so my main communication with the outside world was American cinema. I think from a young age, I remember kids at school taking the mickey out of me that my heroes were people like Francis Ford Coppola and Ridley Scott. I think I was on a diet of Ridley Scott for a lot of my childhood, and he still sees films in a way that no one else saw then. I remember 1492 and Black Rain, and not just the really well-known movies of his, and they really affected me, and it showed me how you can capture and how you can see things in a way that no other films were really showing me. So, and then obviously as you get older and the testosterone grows in your body, you meet James Cameron and you watch Terminator and all of those films. But essentially I was fed a steady diet of Ridley Scott and science fiction. And that really inspired and affected me. And then I discovered that the films were shot literally just around we have a motorway, a freeway that wraps around London called the M25, and 1/4 of the way around the freeway was Pinewood Film Studios, and I realized that's where they shot Alien, and that's where Aliens, and that's where Ridley Scott was shooting a film at the time. And so I ended up just kind of being drawn to that place and where I could see how the films were getting shot and made. And so that was essentially my childhood.
You know, it's amazing that you mentioned Black Rain, because I thought I was like the only person that had ever seen the movie. And I liked it. You're right. It's one of those films that when you bring it up and you go, yeah, it's got Michael Douglas in it, and people are like, I don't think I've ever seen it. And because it's so dark, it's so gritty, but there's just something about that film, because I think for Michael Douglas, it was really kind of outside the box of what he was normally doing. But, you know, Ridley Scott is a genius.
Yeah. I mean, he's incredible. And also I would watch the making of Black Rain. I remember it was on TV. They had the making of it, and how he would say that the place that they shot in, they would show up a year before shooting, and Ridley would say, okay, so we'll probably have the camera there and we'll have the camera there. And then they would show up a year later. The authorities said, no, you said the camera was going to be here. You have to be here. And so it was that early exposure to the logistical problems of shooting a film. And then in those same makings of hearing Michael Douglas speak about the filmmaker, those kind of insights. And now it's so accessible with YouTube and everything else. But back then, getting a making of on TV was a big deal. And so I just kind of sponged it all in.
Yeah, it's extremely rare. I really wish that when the studios do these big productions, that off to the side, they kind of film those types of things, because I love the backstory of the film even more so than just the film.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And not so kind of distilled down. I want to let it breathe so I can actually be there on that set and watch how they're like, you know, there was a Ryan Johnson's film, The Last Jedi. He had a brilliant making of where they were really open and transparent and vulnerable with the problems of that shoot, and the problems that Mark Hamill was having with the direction of the story. And I really appreciate, more than the movie, that he made a very honest and transparent making of that film. Because whenever you see these issues that on the big movies they have, you realize it's all the same. We have them all on smaller films as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've talked to so many directors, and to hear about some of the issues or problems that they have directing a film, and then they end up under a time constraint, and then something that they want to film, they can't do it the way they need to or want to do it, but they find out a way, and then on screen, you never knew that there was a problem.
No. And there's always the revisionist history of, you know, it was only this good because of the constraints and because of the problems that we had. So that's always interesting.
Yeah, I think, it's so funny. People ask me, what do you think is one of the most beautiful shots in cinema? And I'm like, well, you're probably going to laugh, but one of the scenes that I literally probably put it on a repeat just to watch it, is the movie Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, which was directed by John Woo, where you see that one scene where Nicolas Cage he's either walking to the private jet, and then there's this shot to where his long overcoat is caught in the wind. And just the motion of that is one of the coolest shots I've ever seen.
Very Woo. It has to be something in every frame has to be flowing in the wind. And it is cool.
Yeah, very, very, very dramatic. Well, I need to ask you a question because of the fact that we have an international incident now in the news, and you directed the film Desert Dancer. And how did artist Tumaj Salehi was part of that, right?
Yeah, I was knew he was in prison, and then when the news came out yesterday that the Iranian regime have sentenced him to death by hanging, just devastating. And there's been a big push to try and get awareness about his case and put international pressure. So in the hope that, as has happened with other people, that the regime can commute his sentence. I think his death sentence. He's been called the Tupac of Iran. He's an incredible artist. His music's amazing. And when we were making Desert Dancer, it was a very difficult film to make because my ancestors are from Iran, but I personally was not born in Iran. And a lot of the Iranian actors that I had approached to make that film wouldn't do it because they were frightened of reprisals for their family back home. So I was forced into this situation that to tell the story, I had to cast actors from all over the world. And so we obviously, Freida Pinto is from India, Reese Ritchie is from London and South Africa, and you have people like Marima Collette who's from Malta. So I made the conscious effort of, okay, so let me find actors from all over the world to represent this one country. But when it came to the music and when it came to other elements in the film, it had to be authentic. And all of the young people that I knew from Iran would always talk about his music. And so we reached out to him and he gave us permission to put his songs in the film. And so there's a number of scenes where his songs are in the movie, in particular, the nightclub scenes. And I just remember loving that. And then, it's been a while since we made that film. And then when I found out he was imprisoned, and then yesterday, the terrible news, it's just awful. And it goes to show that, when you suppress an artist's voice in such a manner, it's just so wholly wrong. And I just feel nothing but gratitude that I live in a country where we take it for granted, but where that kind of freedom of expression is not suppressed and is not met with such horrific, painful violence and the threats of snuffing out people's lives and their voices before they've properly had a chance to speak. It's just so horrible and evil. And I hope people can really push the awareness about his plight, and that hopeless hope that they would commute his sentence. But it's awful, and it
It,
reminds us what that film is about. It's just
indeed, and I've talked to a few film directors that were born in Iran as well as Afghanistan. They found ways to get out,
mm,
and now they're able to tell the story through filmmaking. Even last year, there was a short film, an unknown short film called Rise. The
hmm
the director has never been named.
hmm
It's a female Iranian director, and Rise is a film about the Iranian morality police and the brutality against women.
hmm
And I was, I had a PR reach out to me and said, "Would you be interested in doing the interview?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I didn't even think twice about it. And then everything went silent. And come to find out, the security risk just to do the interview was so high that they pulled it because it was so dangerous to do the interview.
It's ridiculous.
It,
But this is the importance of art. Art can change. Regimes are frightened of art, especially with artists who have a powerful voice and know how to use it.
and you're right. And art is a very, very powerful medium that, well, we've learned in a way it can change nations. And, boy, I just pray that Tumaj will have his sentence commuted or some way, somehow be able to leave Iran.
You know what the thing is? I think he would even say he did. There's a lot of artists, and I can speak directly with knowledge of Afshin Ghaffarian, but they don't want to leave Iran. This is the thing. Iran is an incredibly beautiful country with the most incredible, rich culture you can imagine. It's just ruled under the iron fist of the most despicable and awful regime you can imagine. Same with Afghanistan. But it's just but in Iran, the most amazing people, and a lot of these artists don't want to leave. They love their country as they should, and it's not a case of escaping. It's a case of just being having the freedom to be able to express oneself artistically without fear of reprisal.
And
I'm echoing what many people have told me,
yeah,
uh, especially in reaction to Desert Dancer, which was literally about somebody who escapes Iran, but who has since, in the years following the movie, has gone back home.
now, did you receive any? No, you didn't receive any threats making the movie, did you?
No, no, I would, I've been told that I should never get on a plane and go to Iran, as they have Google too. And I don't think I would return home if I went, which is a shame. My wife's family are Iranian, and I know I would love to accompany her to go back to her homeland. And my ancestors are from Iran and Iraq, and so I would love to be able to make the pilgrimage to visit my roots, my original roots. But it's yeah, unless there is a big governmental change, that would be far too dangerous, and I definitely would not be. I've been told I would not be allowed to leave.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember Iran prior to 1979.
Hmm.
It was, like you said, it's a beautiful country. The cities were extremely metropolitan, as if you were in LA or New York or London. They
Oh
were
yeah,
that way. But you're right. It comes down to the ruling government that changes things. And I know the perception in America about Iran, they don't realize the beauty of that country.
no, exactly. And in all honesty, until I started developing that film Desert Dancer, neither did I. And then you discover facts like it was the very first country in the world that had a charter on human rights. You know, I mean, it's the country that gave birth to that whole area with Rumi and Hafez. This is the place that gave birth to great poets and great poetry and some of the great arts. that we know today. So it's the birthplace of not just human rights, but great artistry and great artisanship, and for it now to that's the contrast for it to have begun there and for it to now be what it has become because of the Islamic Republic of Iran, because of the regime. It resonates in a way that nowhere else does. It's awful.
Well, I want to ask you about your artistic vision because you are the only filmmaker to successfully film a
Mm.
film during a solar eclipse,
Yes.
but using the eclipse as a storyline. Tell us about where the idea came from for Souls of Totality.
After Desert Dancer, there was a period of time where I was developing other feature films. I was developing a movie with Benedict Cumberbatch. I was developing a film with Tom Hardy, one with Evan Rachel Wood, and it felt very exciting. And then one by one, each of those films collapsed in spectacular style and didn't happen. And I felt like I had gone back to the beginning. And I felt that a lot of things were out of my control. And I wanted to just remind myself you know, why I want to make film and get back to that sense of living in Hertfordshire and making a film with friends and using what we have around us. And one of my daughter at the time was only 2, and we had a nanny from Oregon, and she mentioned that there was a solar eclipse that was going to go right over her father's house, and that all the flights and all the hotels had been booked out, but we should drive up and go camping in a field and check out the eclipse. I thought it was a really awesome idea. That night, I was having dinner with Tom Cullen and Tatiana Maslany, 2 actors, and and I mentioned this, and they said, "Oh, let's all go up camping together. Let's go check out the eclipse together." And I'm sitting there at the dinner, and I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, "Oh my god, we have to make a film." And they were like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "This is the first eclipse that's gone through the entirety of North America for 100 years. There's not going to be another one till 7 years later this year or 6 years later this year, and then there won't be another one for another 25 years. Like, this is a one-off thing." And Tat Maslany was really excited about that because it's like theater. You have one chance. Like, there's no going back. And so we all just started feverishly Googling, had this been done before? And there was one film in the 60s or 70s, Baracas, but that claimed to have done it, but they didn't. They did it in a studio, and they just had like a camera filming an eclipse, and they cut to a studio, and the lights in the studio went down. So this had never been done before. So I thought, wow, let's do this. I called up my dear friend Ben Boley and his wife Kate Treffry, and I said, "Look, I've got Tatiana Maslany, I've got Tom Cullen, and I've got this idea. And all I know is that it's set in Oregon at the nanny's house." And I went to Oregon, I took pictures of the house and a farm next door. I said, "This is the location, these are the actors. The eclipse is in 3 weeks, or it is in 4 weeks. Can you write me a script?" And all I know is that I just want it to end with running. I just see running. They're like, "Great." 2 weeks later, and then so they promised they would write the script. I partnered with Kate Treffry, the writer, her brother John Treffry, who's a producer in Los Angeles, and we worked together to crew up the film for a script that hadn't been written. I raised $25,000 off a family who were dear friends that were about to spend that money on a holiday at the Four Seasons, and I was like, "No, don't go to the Four Seasons. Come to Oregon and be part of this." And they were like, "Okay." And so they canceled their trip and ended up making it a camping trip in Oregon and giving us the money to make this short film. And 2 weeks before the eclipse, Ben and Kate sent me the script. And oh, word. I mean, look, it's one thing having an idea, and it's one thing being able to crew up a film and raise money. But it's another thing having to write a script that worked so well even without the eclipse. I fell in love with their screenplay of this mythology of the souls of totality and a love story that was really skewered on this fact of a forbidden love, but set subjectively within a cult. So there's not an outsider coming in being judgmental, seeing these people as crazy, but actually telling a love story from within a cult where it's just full of joy. There is no judgment. And I just thought it was wholly original and really beautiful. And everyone loved it. And off we went to Oregon. We all camped in a field. Everyone that's on screen in the gray tracksuits, they are the crew. And we were just making dinner, making lunch, living on this farm in amongst masses of piles of cow poo, and it was just amazing. Um, and it reminded me totally of when I was a young teenager living in Hertfordshire, making films with my dad's video camera, and I loved it. There was no producers or investors like looking over your shoulder, telling you how you should do things. It was, and for the first time in my life as a young father, I was able just to go on my instinct. And for the first time since I started, I was like, everything clicked as a filmmaker. I was like, no, this is my voice, and this is how I want to tell a story. I didn't get that on Desert Dancer. Desert Dancer was me feeling it out. It was my first film. It was like film school for me. But this was, this is who I am as a filmmaker. And just that sense of leaving my ego at the door and being very open to the collaboration with everyone. And that's something I got from producer John Treffery, because in England, they're all pretty elitist. You're like, you're here, the focus puller's over there. But John taught me, no, you bring everybody in and you listen to everybody. And that opened my heart and opened my mind to just listening to the best idea and then stealing it, really, and going, great, I love that.
Well, did you film it all in one day, or did you just film the sunny parts separately?
It was filmed over 4 days. The Eclipse was the last day, I think. And what we did is every day of the first 3 days of filming, we would set aside an hour every day to rehearse the Eclipse scene. And then from the NASA website, because there hadn't been an eclipse for 100 years, no one knew what to expect. But the NASA website had a map of the path of totality with the exact location and time, which was ironically right over the farm which was the neighbor of the nanny's father's house. And it had the exact time of when the eclipse would begin, when it would reach totality, and when it would end. So Tatiana Maslany was a dancer, and I had just done a dance film where choreography and time-based action was what we crafted the whole film around. So I just used that experience to time out this set piece and the first AD, Doug Metzer, whose first film was Dances with Wolves. He was known as the outdoors guy, which was great. It's from Santa Fe. And so he would be shouting off camera the times, 10, 15, 20. And so Tat would know at each second where she had to hit. And the science is amazing. The NASA data was absolutely pinpoint correct. We knew when the camera would go up, when it would go down, where we would catch the eclipse. And we rehearsed it for 3 days. And then when it came the day of the eclipse, we shot the scene, and all the crew the way that we were able to get the crew to agree to work for free on this film was that they would see the eclipse. And so, but then when we get there, we realized we need the crew to all be laying under blankets for the end. So everyone had poked holes in their blankets so they could lie on the ground and look at the eclipse while we're filming this sequence. And at the very end, as the camera comes up for the profile 2 shot, that's where the crew all get up from under their blankets and run behind the camera, and they're all looking up at the eclipses. I'm looking at the 2 actors through the monitor at this beautiful moment of love and connection that they brought to the screen, and it was just the most magical experience. And the thing I'll never forget is that I'm British, so I don't really show too much emotion, but everyone burst into tears. And I realized that it wasn't that we had put so much pressure on ourselves to make this work, because if the cameraman had fallen over, if Tat had missed her mark, the lens we got was an old lens. It was always coming off the gears of the focus. So there were so many things that could have gone wrong. And if it went wrong, then it would have all been for nothing. Like, we wouldn't have had a film. So there was a lot of pressure on this scene. But I felt, because I hadn't worked in a long time, this was my Hail Mary pass. And I had nothing to lose because I didn't really have anything. But I realized that sense of relief and the emotion and the tears that we all shared at the end was actually because we were part of something that was really incredibly beautiful. And to have filmed a dramatic scene in that, it was amazing.
Well, I have a question, because to film this eclipse, you're starting off with a camera where you have plenty of light. And then
Mm-hmm.
as the eclipse is happening and it gets dark, and then the eclipse is starting to move in the different direction where the light comes back. How did the cinematographer handle the f-stop?
Well, Jaron Blansky, who went on to become Oscar nominated for The Lighthouse, and I met him because he had done The Witch, which I loved. He's probably the most passionate person I know when it comes to cinematography, and he had done a lot of research. But it was the great unknown. We didn't know like what would happen. But we were shooting on a Alexa Mini, and we used a 27mm lens, so it was quite wide. And what we ended up, I remember the focus puller was also on the remote aperture. And so it was on the iris. So I just heard Jaron, when the sun went down, he just went, open up all the way. So we just opened it right up to get as much light into the camera as possible. And then when we went to the grade, there's this amazing company in Burbank called Photochem. Nolan does his films there. Ryan Johnson does his films there. And there is a place there for independent filmmakers called The Lodge, which is run by the most brilliantly talented colorist called Alistair. And he just spent probably a week longer than what we were allowed to do, just making sure it was, we were bringing out what was already there in the camera in terms of the grading.
I mean, the whole scene just of the eclipse from beginning to end is so seamless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually spectacular to watch. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never seen it's actually something to see. I mean, so when you're there, how long did the eclipse actually last in which you were filming?
I mean, the take is the take. I mean, however long that was, I think I remember it being like a 3-minute, 4-minute eclipse, 3 4 minute eclipse. But it was, I have to give it to the actors because one of the things I didn't want to do was cut to an eclipse. This is not a Nat Geo documentary. This is a love story. And so the eclipse really was about the environment changing and how the environment would affect them being present as actors in that moment as those characters. That's what I was really interested in. And obviously, we're going to see the eclipse in the foreground, and we're going to plan that. But essentially, it's thrilling and watchable because of I just think this perfect, incredible matching of the blocking and Jaron Blansky's camera operating, the eclipse, Tat Maslany's beautiful performance, the chemistry on screen between Tom and Tat, and just the dedication to everyone to get it right. It was, I mean, I was actually talking to my wife about it this morning in preparation for the interview, where I was just like, I'm happy living the rest of my life knowing that will be the best it ever gets. And that's okay. Because I never, you always think that as you have a career, you would hit those points in your career a lot later. But for me, that was it. And it almost feels like I'm okay with that. And I'm very grateful for it. Because
Well,
I don't know how it could get better. That was the most.
you are the only one. I mean, you're the only one that's ever pulled this off. But what I love about you using a real eclipse, you have the most incredible screenplay to work with, because during the eclipse, that is the scene in which the lead character, we know she was chosen to stay behind, but for her, because of the way that you filmed this with the eclipse, for her, there was a darkness in her life because for her, she felt like she was alone. And it was the light before and after, especially after, which was really, that was the beautiful moment.
Kate Jeffrey and Ben Bollet, they always said for them, it's a film about, I would rather, if looking at it from the subjective lens of that Cole, what she is thinking is, I would rather stay here in hell with you then go alone to paradise. They look at it as the other way around. And it's just this upside down, skewered, really interesting love story in that regard. And yeah, she's come from an abusive family, most likely. We don't know too much about her. There are hints in the story. So a lot of people always ask about the feature of Souls of Totality, but for us, it's the third act of a movie that never needed a first or a second act.
Well,
So,
I love the fact that you said that this is without bringing an outside stranger in, you kept the storyline pure.
mm-hmm.
And because you have a cult, you can tell that, there was probably some sort of brainwashing going on. There's a belief system because they were born and raised in this
Mm-hmm.
cult. There is this fear that some of them are feeling that is coming because of the eclipse. And there's a little bit of a sci-fi moment at the very end. And, but it was just one of the best stories I've ever seen. And then I had to do a little bit of research after I watched your film. I looked up the definition of eclipse. And besides being a celestial event, it can also mean a disgraceful or humiliating end or a downfall. So for me, the cult, were they leaving the downfall of mankind on Earth?
Think of it this way. Over generation upon generation, there are now hundreds and hundreds of people from the Souls of Totality in another plane of existence, building a new community, starting again. And maybe it's not what they expected it would be. But essentially, it's about family, it's about community, and it's about starting again. And but I say that without judgment. I say that while staying subjective from their point of view, because that's the only important point of view. I can look at that and be like, people are insane, and that's crazy, and like the world is beautiful, and what are you doing? But who knows how their story would turn out after that moment together. But if you're standing in a field full of empty blankets, then all of the prophecies and all of the mythology that you've been fed, you suddenly realize is true. So I think this past eclipse, they were somewhere off in the suburbs of Detroit, and they'd built a new community, and I think they went.
Well, I was actually happy for the ending because during the moment, I think it was at the beginning of the eclipse where all of the cult members are in the field, they're on their blankets or sheets or whatever, and they have this pink drink in their hand. And I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, oh no, not a Jim Jones moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I thought. But then here's this ending when the lead characters embrace, but then the rest of the cult, I guess, they, like you said, everything they've been taught came true.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to see that. It's not very... And tonally, it's not right for the film, but it's implied that what they've done, but it's not. But it's about her to try and stop him from leaving, to stop him from going, and it's about the sacrifices. It's a huge sacrifice she made, and it's about the sacrifices we make for love, and how a looming moment, a defining moment, can bring out huge change in all of us.
Indeed. Now, I have a question to ask because there was something that kind of bugged me. When she drove off in the SUV.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she slams on the brakes.
Yeah.
And she gets out and she starts running back. Was that when she had to basically count her steps from that point? Because I'm thinking, why didn't she just turn the SUV around and just drive back?
It's the number one comment on the message boards of anyone who shares the film. There are two answers to this question. the truth is that in the script it called for the pigs that the souls were farming. They had released all the animals before they would depart. And as she's driving, there are some pigs on the road. And before she can, in the script, there were some pigs on the road. And before she can reverse, there are pigs behind the car. So she has no chance but to get out of the car and run. On the day, it was really hot. And the farmer said to us, my pigs, if you can't shoot the scene in under 20 seconds, my pigs are going to die from the heat. So we couldn't shoot the pigs. So I said, oh God, what do you have? And he goes, well, I got a horse and I got some cows. I was like, all right, we'll take a cow. And he goes, oh, you don't want no scrawny cow. I'll give you my prize bull. So he runs off into the field and starts bringing this massive 300-ton bull onto the road. And we're like, okay. And so we all luckily the first AD had done Dances with Wolves, so he knew how to, he told everyone to get behind the car and be really small. And I conceived of this shot, which is my favorite shot in the film, where we see the bull and it just happened to walk past the car and we just zoomed in on the wing mirror where you see her run off. So I was forced into making that story decision, and then obviously I would make up an excuse. I'm like, oh, she's feeling too emotional. She can't do a 3-point turn when she's running for the man that she loves. So look, there is a bit of a plot hole there, but in my head, she's not going to do a 3-point turn on a narrow road and run off. In the mix, I kind of put like an axle braking, but I don't think it's very audible. So I forgive anyone that points that out.
I think it worked because there's an emotion as she's running. I even felt, just the fatigue, the stress of her trying to get back to that field in time. I was even waiting for her to grab her side, if it started hurting from running like that. But I thought it was absolutely perfect. Is there any place at the moment online or streaming for people who may have never seen The Souls of Totality that they can actually watch it now?
Yep, you can go to Vimeo, which is my preferred viewing platform because there's no interruptions with advertisements. Just type in Souls of Totality on Vimeo and there it is. It is on YouTube, but they seem to interrupt it with adverts, and the quality is not as superior as Vimeo. But Vimeo is the way to go.
Wow, fantastic. Now, do you have any upcoming projects that you're working on that you can talk about?
I am producing a film with Damien Chazelle called Heart of the Beast for Paramount Studios, which I'm not directing, but David Ayer is directing, which is a survival movie in Alaska about a Navy SEAL and his military dog. It's a script that we developed and brought to Damien, and they've taken it to Paramount. And it's funny, Paramount did their cinematic slate at CinemaCon for all the exhibitors, and we were the only original film in the entire Paramount slate for 2 years. Everything else is Transformers and G.I. Jane and Paw Patrol, G.I. Joe and Paw Patrol. And so I was extremely proud that a script that we found and developed is now going to be shown theatrically, because that's the most important thing for me, which is why I love doing the short films, because we had a bigger theatrical release than most indie movies would have, so that was amazing. I have a long developed film called Freetown that once was with Tom Hardy and Benedict Cumberbatch and is now going to someone else. We'll see soon. That Pierre Morau is directing. And that's going to be shooting in South Africa, I think in September, October. And I've written a film that's very close to my heart called Wingspan, which is based on my family's immigration journey and kind of my fears of failing as a filmmaking and the hope that I see in my children. It's about a child who finishes her father's movie. And I'm really excited about that. There will be a Souls of Totality feature, but it will be different than the short film. Script is coming soon. And my wife is an amazing songwriter, but her day job is she does Botox and fillers for people in Los Angeles. Some of the most incredible people walk through our door. But I've been really affected by the way that people want to look younger and how society forces them. So I'm writing with an amazing writer, a story, a horror film about Botox, essentially. And so that's called Pretty, and that might happen later on in the year. There's a lot of things, and so we'll see.
Wow. So, how many ideas do you get a day for a film?
Not many, but I've got nine features at the same time, all in various stages, and some have been in development for well over 10 years, and some have. I was attached to direct a film that I was very passionate about called 1,000 Paper Cranes, based on the true story of Sadako Sasaki, and we had cast Evan Rachel Wood, the producer of Saving Private Ryan, Ian Bryce. We had been scouting all over Japan. I've been to Russia many times. We had announced that film, and COVID collapsed the whole movie. And the industry shifted after COVID to the point where these types of films were now told on television. So the chance of that movie happening was thwarted. However, since then, and especially with the rise of shows like Shogun on Hulu, there's been a lot more interest in the film, and so that film might come back up around again too, which I would be really delighted, because that's a film that's very close to my heart. It's a beautiful story.
I think that's what's missing in cinema right now, and when I say cinema, I'm talking about movie theaters, is that we don't see enough films that are very artistic. We don't really see films of romance at the moment, and we sure don't even see films of comedy, because all the comedies are just shoved on streaming.
Yeah. I a lot of the films nowadays feel like they're made by committee, and they don't, and the ones that have a singular voice are not as accessible as the ones that I loved when I was younger. But I just stay focused on the stories I want to tell, and hopefully they can connect and resonate with audiences. It's so hard making a film. It's this. You speak to so many people, but but you realize that, especially like with something like Souls, that a lot of people thought would get to the Oscars, but we only got longlisted. And same with A Million Eyes, you realize that all of that is just noise, and it doesn't actually matter, and that the true reward is the making of it. Nothing else. You get to that point where you're greenlit. I'm alone in my office right now. I'm working. As soon as I finished with you, I'm back into my rewrite on something, and you're kind of isolated working, and you're trying to get back to that point where you're on a set with crew that you're probably their third film of the year, and you haven't made a film for a few years, and you're just getting back to that point of collaboration. And that is the Oscar win. That is everything. And it's funny, the journey you go on that teaches you that, and to have gratitude for that. And that's the I'm grateful for everything that's come before, because it really makes you realize that all you really want to get to is that point of shooting.
Yeah, the film that I want to see from you is Wingspan.
Thank you. I'm really excited about that film, and I wish I could tell you more, but films get old very quickly, and I don't want to be talking about it again in a year.
No. I will wait till you get it done, when it's released, and we can definitely talk about it, because the story, as you told the story, it's just so beautiful.
I love to tell a film that speaks to that innocence of young people making film, and the joy that comes with that, the lack of politics, the lack of, and just how everything seems possible when you're younger, and nothing's ambitious, it just feels natural. And just the idea of finding your voice, and finishing a legacy that never got a chance to be finished. It's really inspired by just my daughter, and how she's only 8. She's nearly 8. Her name is Rumi, named after the poet. And just watching her thrive. And she's so clever, and she's so smart. I have a photograph of my great-grandfather in a tent in Iraq. He used to do molds of shoes and sell them in a tent in Iraq. And here I am living in Los Angeles. And I'm just like, and I just look at the immigration journey, the sacrifices that my family have made, and the journey that they've made to enable me to live where I am today. And I see how that's being continued in my daughter. and that the film is about that
Well, I
and the
can't
power.
wait to see it.
Thank you. Well, I'm
I
going to get
can
back and finish it.
exit you, but yeah, please do. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you need to go to Vimeo. You need to type in Souls of Totality. You will see again the only film ever done during a real solar eclipse. Fantastic story. It doesn't miss a beat. You'll be sitting there with your eyes glued to the screen, waiting to see what happens, not just waiting on the eclipse, but the story alone is powerful enough that it stands on its own, even if there was no eclipse. But the eclipse is actually it actually plays a character in this film. And Richard, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ward. What a pleasure to speak to you. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, you can catch all of the replays of our interviews with the top film directors, producers, and screenwriters, as well as actors on Bond on Cinema. We're also available on YouTube and a dozen audio platforms as well. I want to thank you for watching and listening. And as for me, I'll either see you at the movies or from the red carpet.